Greetings to all. This is Abhivadan from Global Law Assembly, and here we are with the third episode of season 3 of Global Hint. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Terry Temple. He's the director of Sabre One, and this discussion, which is this dialogue, is a part of a collaboration between Internationalism Global Podcast and Covents for the Counter Expo 2022. So this is Global Hint Counter Expo edition. I welcome Terry into the podcast, and so I would say namaste, Terry, and it's great to have you on board.
Thanks for having me on here today.
Certainly. So, in this episode, we are going to discuss about counterterrorism in a multipolar world. And of course, we will discuss about the work that your organization, Sabre One, does, and what do you expect from Counter Expo 2022. So, to begin with, let's put some context about your experience per se and your organization Sabre One. So as far as the viewers must know, as I think Terry will describe better than me, Sabre One is a security management and medical assistance company. Its major work is in security and counterterrorism, but it of course has its own role in medical assistance and other things related to it. So it's a quite interesting combination of things because we understand that health and security go hand in hand. And I think this is pretty visible during this COVID-19 pandemic when the third waves are coming in various countries, including India. As far as experts are concerned, the third wave of COVID has already begun, and might cases quite peak or not. So, to start with and understand the work, how would you describe the inspiration behind Sabre One and what does Sabre One do?
Hi, thanks very much for the introduction. It was very nice. We're at Sabre One. We're a global provider of security solutions to address national and international challenges for governments and corporations. We're more a security company outside the box. We don't do your average security of a guard at the gate. If you wanted a guard at the gate, but we would train them up to a very high standard. But it's not something that we do. We do more counterterrorism, force protection, and intelligence gathering. That is the main aspect of our company.
Interesting. So let's begin this discussion by understanding the transformation of the so-called realpolitik of counterterrorism, because whosoever who are the non-state actors who are involved in counterterrorism, and even these days state actors in certain countries, without naming anyone, of course, there are actors who have changed the way the conflict economics behind counterterrorism works, because as far as we know, dealing with terrorism itself is a great challenge, and it becomes difficult day by day. So let's begin by I understand there's some
technical issues. All right, just leave it.
definitely, it's perfectly fine. So so let's talk about certain common geopolitical issues which we have seen so far in a mainstream sense to understand the churning that is going on in this field also. So we saw the withdrawal of the American troops from Afghanistan. We saw that particular crisis situation. And we saw that how with the so-called Islamic Emirate, governments including India and others are trying to cooperate on health issues such as basically giving them COVID vaccines and other things altogether. But if we look at the overall situation, how does the so-called win, as we say, because people are claiming it, not saying that it is, the so-called emergence of Taliban, because we know that ISIS Khorasan is also there, then there are border issues with Pakistan too. How is that the emergence of Taliban itself shows that the churn of dealing with terrorism itself through activities and operations of counterterrorism itself has gone to a different level altogether? It's not so same as it was before, and how should we learn from it in general?
Well, after 9/11, as you know, the Americans and Western powers, they went into Afghanistan and removed the Taliban from power. The reason was because of the terrorist incidents that happened at 9/11, Twin Towers and things like that. But also it was seen as a training camp for fundamentalism at the end of the day. The Taliban was engaged when the Americans and everybody went in, and they were pushed out of power. The problem was they weren't defeated, and as everybody knows, nobody has ever defeated or won a war in Afghanistan, going right back to the 1800s. It's never been a conquered state. So your Taliban just sunk back into the general populace and continued harassing and biding their time, where the Americans and NATO powers were smashing everything they could, throwing money at it, training up Afghan troops, trying to do hearts and minds. But the problem was the hearts and minds was money given to the governments, and the money wasn't going down to the problems in hand, where you had starvation, you had a lot of work-related incidents, you had culture incidents where you've got different tribal affiliations and things like that. So the Taliban just bid their time. Yeah, they were like a dog nipping at your heels all the time. They'd come out of the bush, bite you, sink back in. Nobody knew who they were. And it was a different sort of warfare than anybody else really knew. Going back many, many years, you can name Vietnam as the second one, where it was the population at the end of the day that these guys won their hearts and minds. The population knew that, yeah, the Western were there, but they were only going to be there for a short time. So they would play one side against the other, which is to stay alive. That's what they did. And it showed. And then when the Americans pulled out, the Taliban have taken over. But it's a different Taliban from what we know originally, where before they were doing lots of beheadings and generally forcing their documentation on the civilians. Now they've got a very good protocol things. Western governments are looking to put their embassies in there where they never had them before. And it looks like if the Taliban carry on like they are, they will be a force to be reckoned with. But they're also got the other problem of being a terrorist organization. So until that all changes, not a lot is going to change.
Indeed. And I think therein the churn itself comes in geopolitically, because there are regional issues and so forth. So to understand more context about counterterrorism, let's get on to Africa for that matter.
Yeah.
Because it's a mix of developing and underdeveloped, and I would say, let's not say underdeveloping, but let's say underdeveloped and developing economies, which are trying to emerge out of poverty, and they are trying to have better lives. But we know that situations of civil war and other things are somewhere down the line, unfortunately, common in African countries. Some
Yep.
African countries, all. There are near about 50 or 58 African countries. And as far as the aspect of influence is concerned, we see that there are Gongos, which is government-oriented NGOs from China. And of course, there
Mhm.
are activities by the Turkish counterparts who are actually involved in the continental Africa.
Mhm.
So usually we generally have focus in the international discourse about the West Asian portion, which is Middle East, or
Mhm.
we focus on South Asia, or we focus on the transatlantic, or then we might obsess around Ukraine, Russia, and now because of the protest in Kazakhstan, the Kazakh
Mhm.
country. So, but Africa is somewhere down the line ignored, in the sense that we do not understand that maybe it could become a geopolitical theater. So, how counterterrorism is advanced and remodernized in that sense, it's something which we can understand by how actors play their roles and how things change in Africa. So, how do you see the situation there, and in a sense, what is understandable from that aspect?
Well, if you split up Africa into its compass bearings, where you've got West Africa, Southern Africa. A lot of the problems, as you know, is in West Africa, and you've got a lot of what would you call it, fundamentalist activity in the area. You had ISIS, you've got a few other Boko Haram, and a few other players there. They're all doing their ideology thing, that they're doing it to increase the Muslim world in Africa. But it's not. It's becoming. They're using titles for criminal actions at the end of the day. Yes, they're a military force. The problem with West Africa was a lot of the military there were never trained in counterterrorism. They were more peacekeepers in an environment, or a nice quiet environment. The best one was people in Burkina Faso, which we've worked in quite often. Their forces used to go and support the UN missions, but it wasn't a counterterrorism thing. It was a support mission doing normal military work. All of a sudden now they got attacked by terrorists operating from the bush, using completely different tactics than a normal military would use. Hit and run, hitting the populace, getting money, hitting little outposts where you've only had a couple of soldiers or gendarmerie or policemen collecting arms and ammunition, and then disappearing. And your governments then all of a sudden found themselves in this big conflict, lack of equipment, lack of training, and now they're trying to figure out what they should do. They send the military in. The problem is the military are used to fighting another military. They've now got to tend with the civilian population that have just been harassed, and they saying, the military is saying, well, you're supporting these guys. They're not, because these guys turned up with a gun and turned around and said, we want food. What are you going to do? You're going to give them food. So it's a whole new way of doing things, and it's all the way across the Shangaan area of West Africa. Nigeria, they're doing hit and runs every single day. You've got bandits now operating, and they're using it, or tribalism. They're taking out their grudges now on the other tribe, because they used to come along and take their cattle and things like that. So now that they're using it as though it was a terrorist action, they'll go along and they'll wipe out villages and get their cattle. So it's becoming very, very unstable. You've now got Mali as well. The French influence in Mali, they're withdrawing back. You've got the Wagner group that's gone into Mali to support. And the Western governments are thinking, well, hold on. If they're using private Wagner groups, what are we doing here? Because we've seen the Wagner group down in Central African Republic, and they're doing a lot of atrocities and things like that, because they're not a conventional army. They don't report to anybody. So it becomes a very, very big problem. You then get your population turning against the government, because they're hiring people like this who are just literally thugs, and they don't care if the civilian gets in the way of the firefight, as long as they take. Also, what is the government actually giving these groups? What we found, you were talking earlier about the Chinese. Chinese are coming in and buying up, and they've bought up most of Africa by building projects and stuff like that. And poor people are selling their souls, or governments are selling their souls to the detriment of their population. So it's going to be a never-ending wheel. But until everybody realizes that it all comes with training and intelligence gathering, that's the only way you're going to defeat these guys.
That's really interesting as far as the vulnerability question is concerned, for those populations who do not have enough security arrangements per se.
Yep.
So let's get down to your background in health assistance, and let's say medical assistance, not health assistance.
Yep.
So if you see the current scenario of COVID, what we understand is that various variants are coming up, and they will come in. We don't know how they occurrence is a different issue altogether. I'm not getting on that question, but it turns out that when it comes to vaccine rollouts and those things which are concerned with and related with, uh, except countries like India, which have manufactured their own vaccines, Many developing countries are currently having issues.
Yeah.
So, is it possible that a lack of accessibility of vaccines and lack of accessibility of this kind of medical assistance could be connected with this problem also? That humanitarian assistance is at a fall or not happening properly because of terrorism issues and other things. Because round we understand that conflict economy has to feed on something which makes money, or at least which is something which is worth business. And of course, the more vulnerability is, the murkier it becomes. So, what is your perspective on this particular phenomena post COVID, first wave and second waves in various countries around the world? How do you see
the,
it?
the problem we've got with COVID is going to be a never-ending story with the COVID. The problem is Western nations are vaccinating their populace and everything like that, but the third world countries have got nothing. We might send them 100,000 vials for some populace. That's a drop in the ocean. The problem you've got is then this you're going to end up with mutations of these diseases. We've already found that lately with the new one out of South Africa, where these different variants, and then you find out that yes, it spreads a lot. It's not as dangerous, but it knocks off a lot of your population. It then decreases the amount of work people can do, thereby hitting your economies. Western governments need to help support the third world countries. We've got to go in there with a vaccinating program, because we'll only get rid of this problem by making sure everybody gets vaccinated. Right up to the poor guy sitting in a mud hut in the middle of the Sahara. He needs to be vaccinated, right? I understand. I'm not going to go on to this thing about people that don't want to be vaccinated. That's a completely different story. I'm talking about helping people that want to be vaccinated, and helping governments out. Programs need to be put in, and it's no good just sending the vaccines to the governments. It needs to be properly NGO'd, a program where you go in and help them, their Ministry of Health, distribute the stuff and hopefully train people to be able to inoculate people. But until we start doing that, we're going to have, in England already, they're talking about the fourth booster or the fourth jab, right? How many jabs are you going to need? You're going to be walking around looking like a pincushion very shortly. But we need to stop it, because every time you open up the border, a new variant will come in, and it will just keep on mutating all the time. It's going to be like the flu. We understand that. But each year, you're going to have a flu jab, but not 5 or 6 jabs every 4 months. So until we get our act together and start thinking also of the third world populace, we're not going to sort COVID out. We're going to have to learn to live with it. Yeah.
That's quite interesting to estimate. Um, Recently, so this is from India. So recently, India's COVID response, of course, has been now much better as far as vaccination and awareness has been concerned. And of course, this has risen to a much level that even 200 crores, let's convert 200 crores to millions,
Yep.
million number of people in India have been vaccinated. I
Yeah.
think a good number of population has been given both of the doses, and senior citizens in India now getting a prescription dose. We don't call it a booster dose, we just call it a prescription dose, but that too, even after, like, let's say 7 or 9 months, because of the efficacy of our Indian vaccines. So this is a question about certain understanding of conflicting interests, because what amazes me is that while there are governments in the West who are concerned at vaccination or vaccination program and other aspects which you're talking about in developing countries and underdeveloped countries, there's a corporate aspect of it, of course, because there are companies, I'm not taking any names, there are companies who are actually not in America and UK and other parts of the world, who are less interested in the particular initiative, and they're quite concerned as to whether this should be done in the much I would say reasonable way, because if people don't understand that economies work on mobility, and without
Yep.
getting vaccinated and not at least ensuring that the virus doesn't spread like that, because you need herd immunity, you need vaccine based immunity. Without that, economies don't work. Unreasonable and arbitrary lockdowns can go on. We know how governments around the world, including in even the regional portions of India, people have tried to come up with arbitrary regulations, but that is something only because not understanding the population, lack of vaccination, vaccine hesitancy, plus lack of ability. While India does not have that problem, but other countries do. Because so, how should we see it? Because this dichotomy does exist, and this does contribute to the problems of humanitarian assistance and medical assistance.
Yeah. The problem that you've got is companies have got a golden egg now, and they developing the vaccines, and there is a cost of it does cost money, and the only problem that you've got is companies are not going to give you free vaccines. We know that, but the Western world can look at it and you use it as an AIDS tool, right? You need to vaccinate everybody. It's Western governments can say what they like. 90% of the gold comes out of Africa. If your gold mines now, if people aren't vaccinated in your gold mines and things like that, that's going to reduce the amount of gold that's being developed or made. That's going to have a knock-on effect on economies. The knock-on effect of that is workers now have to go to hospitals, and they're going to inundate, the same as we had with the NHS in the first wave, and same problem you had in India with the oxygen, where you run out of supplies because everybody all of a sudden is sick. If you've been vaccinated, you don't 90% of the time you don't need to go to a hospital because your symptoms are good enough to be able to manage at home. If we don't look after the third world, it will have a very big knock-on effect. A lot of the food and stuff, your tomatoes, your fruits, your potatoes, stuff like that, do come from Africa as well. You know, bananas, coffee, all this sort of thing. The more people that get it, the less time there will be for productivity, and it will have a knock-on effect for the rest of the world. And then the Western governments are going to say, oh, we should have done this. We need to do it now, not tomorrow. And the quicker we do it, the quicker we can get back to working a normal way of life.
That's very nicely put up, I would say, in
Yeah.
best way, I would say. So to conclude, I have a question regarding the expo and your
Yeah.
expectations from the participants, the organizers, and of course those who will join you. So, what do you expect from the Counter Expo 2022? Have you engaged with Indian stakeholders in recent past, let's say before COVID, during COVID, virtually, physically, howsoever? So, what are your expectations, and what is your message to the viewers who might be interested to attend the conference?
Well, the conference is going to be, or the expo is going to be absolutely brilliant. We've got there's a lot of people there with a lot of knowledge. The Indian companies, I work with a few of them. I'm in partnership with convents who do a lot of intelligence gathering, and we use them a lot for our own purposes. They do a lot of support for us. If you need intelligence gathering, either PSYOPs or any other type of intel, they're very good guys. You've got some of the best minds at the moment coming up. There's other guys on these podcasts that be coming up, but we're looking at it as a tool to push our business out there a bit, the medical side as well as the security side, because as you said earlier in your first introduction for us, medical and security work together. And we like to think of ourselves, when we go into a place, we normally put in a medical section to help whoever we're working with and the local population at the end of the day, because they're the stakeholders on the ground. The government might say, yeah, you can have that bit of ground, but they don't own the ground. The people on the ground own that ground. So this one, there's going to be new technology being pushed out. They just had the hackathon. I'm sure a lot of the people out there would have seen that. and there was a lot of intel coming out of this. So I implore anybody that's into this counterterrorism or any of the aspects of or things being shown at the expo to come along and join us.
I would certainly wish the same, and I would recommend people to visit at conference.covens.com to know more about Counter Expo 2022 and attend the amazing sessions. People also who will being watch this video, uh, I hope they must have learned a lot, and we hope to engage with Terry again in future. Maybe, let's see. And I would say that it has been a great time engaging with you. So I thank Terry for taking some of his precious time for this session. And I think with this we would conclude Global Hint Season 3, Episode 3. Till then, viewers, we will be coming up with new episodes shortly. This is the second dialogue in collaboration with Covens. We will be coming up with more dialogues shortly. And till then, stay safe, stay healthy. Do attend Counter Expo 2022 at conference.covens.com. And till then, sayonara, namaste.